The night of April 18th, 1942. Somewhere in Zhejiang province, China. A man sits in a waterlogged rice paddy in the dark. He is soaked through. The field smells of fertilizer. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know where his crews are. He doesn't know if any of them survived. Every aircraft he commanded is gone. He has been here for hours, going over the arithmetic in his mind, and the arithmetic keeps producing the same answer. The mission has failed. He has scattered 16 airplanes across hundreds of miles of hostile territory. He has lost every single one. And sitting in a foreign field in the middle of a war, he's already composing the explanation he will give at his court-martial. This was one of the most decorated military officers in American history. And he was sitting in a rice paddy in China, convinced his career was over. Hours after doing something that would change the course of the entire Pacific War. His name was James Harold Doolittle. He was 45 years old, and what he had done that afternoon, in 18 minutes over the skies of Tokyo, would set in motion a chain of events that neither he nor the Japanese High Command could see coming. The Doolittle raid killed fewer than 90 Japanese civilians. It destroyed no warships. It left no permanent craters. So what did it actually do? December 7th, 1941. A quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii. The Pacific Fleet is moored in its berths at Pearl Harbor. Sailors sleeping late, officers drinking coffee. Then the aircraft come. In less than 2 hours, 2,500 Americans are dead. 18 ships are damaged or sunk. Nearly 300 aircraft are destroyed on the ground. The battleship Arizona burns for 2 days, but the numbers only describe the surface of it. The deeper damage is harder to count. Japan had struck and vanished back into the Pacific like a ghost. No invasion fleet, no second wave to engage. Just the smoke and the wreckage and the silence of a Sunday morning where there used to be a fleet. And in the weeks that followed, Japan appeared unstoppable. Guam fell. Wake Island fell. Hong Kong, Malaya, the Philippines. Japan was everywhere, and the Pacific was very large, and America was looking across it from behind. That was the real weapon, not the bombs, the perception. Japan had hit a blow the United States could not answer, and the world was watching to see whether that remained true. President Franklin Roosevelt told his military chiefs what he needed. Bomb Japan. As soon as possible. The problem was geometric. Japan was beyond the reach of every aircraft the United States controlled. Land-based bombers couldn't get there. The Navy's carrier aircraft were too small and too short range to strike the home islands from a safe distance. Every map in every war room in Washington arrived at the same conclusion. The Japanese home islands were untouchable. In February 1942, a Navy captain named Francis Lowe walked into a meeting with Admiral Ernest King with an idea that didn't make immediate sense. Launch medium Army bombers off a Navy carrier. No one had done it. The aircraft in question, the North American B-25B Mitchell, had a wingspan of nearly 53 feet and had never been designed for a carrier deck. The whole idea seemed to violate some fundamental rule about what machines could do. King sent the concept to Doolittle. James Harold. Doolittle was not a man who spent much time on things that couldn't be done. He had enlisted during the First World War and spent the decades since doing exactly what aviation experts told him was impossible. In 1922, he made the first coast-to-coast flight in under 24 hours. In 1925, he earned a doctorate in aeronautical engineering from MIT. One of the first pilots in the world to do so. In 1929, he sat in a cockpit with a hood over it, unable to see the sky or the ground, and flew, turned and landed using nothing but instruments. The first person in history to manage it. In 1932, he won the Thompson Trophy race at Cleveland, averaging 252 miles an hour, and set the world land-plane speed record at 296. 5 feet 4 inches tall, his nose slightly crooked from boxing, a cleft chin, a grin that appeared in almost every photograph. Everyone who worked with him called him Jimmy. When the army needed someone to take an impossible idea and make it into a mission, the choice was not complicated. Doolittle didn't just accept the assignment. He volunteered for it. He intended to lead the first aircraft off the deck himself. In the days before the fleet sailed, he stood on the Hornet's flight deck with a bomb casing in front of him and a set of small metal decorations in his hands. Japanese medals of friendship, decorations the Japanese government had awarded to American military officers before Pearl Harbor, when the two nations were still nominally at peace. He was attaching them to a bomb that would fall on Tokyo. The photograph was taken. Japan's gifts returned as ordnance. The men chosen for the mission were volunteers from the 17th Bomb Group, and they trained without being told where they were going. Eglin Air Force Base, Florida. Late February, early March 1942. The crews practiced short takeoffs, 500 feet of runway, the length of a carrier deck marked out in paint on the tarmac. A Navy lieutenant named Henry Miller ran the drills. They flew at wave-top level over the Gulf of Mexico. They practiced navigation runs. They took their B-25s on a long-distance, low-level flight that Captain Ted Lawson would later call the final exam. The aircraft had been stripped and rebuilt, extra fuel tanks installed, armament removed to save weight, and in one of the operation's stranger improvisations, the tailgun positions were fitted with wooden broomstick dowels, painted to look like gun barrels from a distance. There were no tailgunners. Just painted wood, built in a machine shop in Florida by men who hadn't been told where they were going. A bluff aimed at Japanese fighter pilots who would have to decide from range whether it was worth getting close enough to find out. On March 31st, the Hornet loaded 16 B-25s onto her flight deck at Alameda, California. The aircraft were too large to go below. They sat topside in 2 rows, wingtips nearly brushing the carrier's superstructure. Every sailor who saw them knew something was happening. None of them knew what. The fleet sailed. If everything went according to plan, if the task force reached 450 miles from the Japanese coast before launching, the crews would arrive over Tokyo and land at prepared Chinese airfields with approximately 20 minutes of fuel in reserve. 20 minutes. By April 13th, the task force had rendezvoused at sea. 2 carriers, 4 cruisers, 8 destroyers, 2 tankers, 2 submarines. Vice Admiral William Halsey, commanding from USS Enterprise. Then his voice came over the loudspeaker across the fleet. This force is bound for Tokyo. What settled through those ships in the moment after, 2,000 men absorbing 3 words, landed somewhere between disbelief and something harder to name. They were sailing toward the place that had come for them in December. In Tokyo, meanwhile, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the man who had designed the attack on Pearl Harbor, was pressing the Japanese High Command to approve a decisive naval engagement somewhere in the Central Pacific before American industrial capacity could close the gap. He had a plan. He was waiting for a pretext. By April 17th, the fleet was pushing west toward Japan. The original plan was still intact. At 3:10 in the morning of April 18th, radar operators on the Enterprise make contact. A Japanese picket boat further out than expected. The task force changes course. Then another vessel, then another. The fleet is threading through a patrol line it was not supposed to find. At 7:38 in the morning, a lookout on the Hornet spots a vessel on the water. 20,000 yards out, barely 11 miles. She is the Nito Maru No. 23, a 70-ton Japanese patrol craft. The USS Nashville moves to intercept and sinks her. 5 of the 11 crew are pulled from the water alive. The captain of the Nito Maru does not survive. He goes down with his ship rather than face capture. But before she went down, the Nito Maru's radio operator had been transmitting. The Japanese military receives the warning. American carriers in the Western Pacific, the coordinates. The Imperial Navy begins to mobilize. Patrol aircraft scrambled. Surface vessels put on alert. The defensive machinery of the home islands begins to turn. And here is what they calculate. Based on everything the Japanese know about American carrier aviation, the range of small carrier-based fighters and dive bombers, the task force cannot possibly be within strike range of Japan until the following morning, April 19th. They have hours to prepare. They are confident. What their understanding of American naval power has no category for is what is sitting on the deck of the Hornet right now, 16 medium Army bombers loaded with bombs and fuel. The B-25B Mitchell is not a carrier aircraft. It was never supposed to be. Japanese naval doctrine is built entirely around short-range carrier planes, and so their defensive calculation is built the same way. They cannot picture what is actually on that deck, and so they do not plan for it. They have received the warning. They are mobilizing. They believe they have until tomorrow. They have nothing. Halsey, Bull Halsey, as everyone called him, a naval officer whose instincts ran toward speed and action, does not wait. The Nito Maru's message got out, and every mile further west is another mile of exposure for half the Navy's remaining carrier strength. The order reaches Doolittle. Launch now. Current position, 650 miles from Japan. Not 450, 650. The men who receive this order understand its arithmetic immediately. The 20-minute fuel reserve is gone. Most of them will not reach the designated Chinese airfields. The months of modification and training and carefully built margin have been erased in a single decision. The crews walk to their aircraft. The North Pacific in mid-April is cold and gray and entirely indifferent to what is about to happen. The swells are running heavy. The Hornet is pitching, her flight deck rising and falling. 467 feet of usable runway to the bow. A city block and a half. The B-25s are loaded so heavily their nose wheels drag. Wingtips sway in the wind over open water. Doolittle is at the front of the line. Nobody has done this before. Taken a loaded B-25 off a carrier at sea. The 15 crews behind him are about to watch it happen, and then they are going to try to do it themselves. He goes to full throttle. The Hornet's bow pitches down into a swell and then rises, and in the instant it crests, Doolittle rolls forward, and the B-25 runs the length of the deck and goes off the bow and drops toward the water and then lifts, then the second, then the third, then all 16, one after another, lifting off the pitching deck in the gray morning, turning west toward Japan. 6 hours. Low and fast over the Pacific, 200 feet off the water, invisible to Japanese radar, burning through fuel they don't quite have. Behind them, the Hornet turns back east, her flight deck empty. Noon. April 18th, 1942. Tokyo. No blackout, no air raid drill. The last time enemy forces struck the Japanese capital was in the 13th century. The city is at peace with its own sky. Spring in Tokyo. Citizens on the streets, ordinary traffic, the shape of a wartime city that has never experienced war on its own ground. Then the approaching engines. Twin-engine aircraft coming in low, military aircraft. Nobody looks twice in wartime. Then someone sees the markings. Olive drab, red, white, and blue stars on the wings and fuselage. The bombs fall first. Then the realization. Doolittle's aircraft reaches Tokyo at noon. The B-25 strike 10 targets in the capital, 2 in Yokohama, then Nagoya, Osaka, Kobe. 4 500-pound bombs per aircraft. They come in low, faster than anti-aircraft guns can effectively track, and then they are banking west before the city has fully understood what is happening. Accounts describe wartime Premier Hideki Tojo, airborne over the city during the raid, close enough to one of the B-25s to see the American pilot in the cockpit. That account has never been verified from Japanese sources, but it holds its own weight regardless. The man who ordered Pearl Harbor, near enough to an American bomber to see the face of the man flying it. The entire raid lasts 18 minutes. 87 dead. 151 seriously wounded. by the standards of what aerial bombing would become over the course of this war, in Germany, in Japan, in England, these are modest figures. No warships sunk. No strategic assets permanently destroyed. 18 minutes, then the planes are gone and Tokyo is burning. West means China. China means the fuel gauge and the darkness and a storm that nobody planned for. By evening, 16 crews are scattered across hundreds of miles of sky, flying into weather over the Chinese coast, burning the last of their fuel over mountains invisible in the dark. The prepared airfields are unreachable. One by one, the pilots make the calculation. 15 crews bail out or crash land over China, in river valleys, on hillsides, in the rice paddies of Zhejiang province. One aircraft, Captain Edward York's, turns north and lands near Vladivostok. The Soviets are not at war with Japan. It will take 13 months to get York's crew out through Iran. In the dark and the rain, Chinese villagers move through the fields with lanterns. Dazed American airmen are coming down with broken bones and burns, wearing flight suits in a country where they have never been. The villagers find them. They give them food. They carry them. Not all of the crews are found by friendly hands. 2 aircraft go down where the Japanese will reach first. 10 men captured. 3 of them, Dean Hallmark, William Farrow, Harold Spatz, will not come home. Doolittle sits in his fertilizer-soaked field. Every airplane he commanded is gone. He doesn't know where his crews are. He doesn't know if they are alive. He is composing his statement for the court-martial board. As he would later put it, when you do a bombing mission, you like to bring your airplanes home. He was certain of Leavenworth. He was wrong about almost everything he thought was true that night. American military planners had known. A raid launched from China's direction, rescued by China's people, would invite Japanese retaliation against China's coastal provinces. They kept the mission secret from their Chinese allies anyway. The people whose airfields the raiders were supposed to land at, whose villages sheltered the men who missed those airfields, whose lanterns moved through the dark on the night of April 18th. They were told nothing. Within days, the Imperial Japanese Army issued its operational orders. The objective: destroy every airfield in Zhejiang province that might have supported the American attack and punish the population that helped. The campaign moved through village after village. Any town, any family suspected of sheltering American airmen. The Japanese army deployed biological weapons. Typhoid-contaminated bread handed to prisoners released back into their villages. Infected biscuits left near roads and fences, near the places where hungry people pass. An estimated 250,000 Chinese died in the months that followed. Historians have compared the accounts from survivors to the rape of Nanking. The people who carried lanterns through the rain on the night of April 18th did not know what they were agreeing to. They were doing what the moment asked. They did not know what the moment would cost. The 69 American airmen rescued in China came home. The people who rescued them did not. Hallmark, Farrow, and Spatz were executed by firing squad in Shanghai on October 15th, 1942, after a Japanese show trial for alleged war crimes. Robert Meda died of malnutrition in a Japanese prison. The remaining 4 survived to liberation in 1945. In Tokyo, the Imperial Navy was reckoning with what the raid had revealed. An American carrier force had approached the home islands in essentially the same manner Japan had approached Pearl Harbor, and had not been stopped. The Navy had guaranteed the security of the home islands. The home islands had been bombed. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor, the man who had warned his own government that attacking the United States was a gamble with a clock on it, took the raid as a personal failure and as the pretext he had been waiting for. He had already been pressing for a decisive naval engagement in the Central Pacific. The Doolittle raid removed every remaining objection and pushed the timeline forward. The defensive perimeter had to be extended far enough east that American carriers could never again reach striking distance of Japan. The operation would target Midway Atoll, 1,200 miles northwest of Hawaii. Here is the sentence that decided the Pacific War. Believing the air raid had been launched from Midway Island, approval was given to Yamamoto's plans for an attack on Midway. The Japanese never determined that the planes came from a carrier. The idea was, to their military doctrine, essentially inconceivable. And so their intelligence apparatus never adequately pursued it. Their conclusion was that Midway had been the staging point, and so Midway had to be seized and destroyed. The Doolittle raiders had launched from the USS Hornet. Midway had nothing to do with it. That error, a single catastrophic misreading of where 16 aircraft had come from, drove the entire Japanese strategic response. The Battle of Midway was fought from June 4th to June 7th, 1942, 7 weeks after the raid. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers, 248 aircraft, approximately 3,000 men. The commanders who had led the attack on Pearl Harbor watched their ships burn in the Central Pacific. The Imperial Japanese Navy never recovered. The momentum of the Pacific War, which had been entirely Japan's for 6 months, changed hands in 4 days. Triggered not by a massive military campaign or a strategic masterstroke, but by 18 minutes of bombing that killed fewer than 90 people, and by the false belief, held with absolute confidence by the most powerful navy in the Pacific, about where those planes had come from. Doolittle's planners had intended to boost American morale and hoped to provoke some Japanese overreaction. They achieved the first. What they got for the second was a magnitude of overreaction no one on either side had imagined possible. The raid didn't avenge Pearl Harbor in the way that phrase is usually meant. What it did was cause Japan to walk into its own destruction, driven by wounded pride and a mistake about geography that no one caught in time to matter. Nobody planned that. Nobody on either side. The Doolittle raiders kept a tradition: 80 silver goblets, one engraved with each man's name. When a raider died, his goblet was turned upside down. A bottle of 1896 Hennessy cognac, the year of Doolittle's birth, was kept sealed, reserved for the last 2 survivors to open together. November 9th, 2013. The National Museum of the United States Air Force, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. 4 old men at a table. Around them, 80 goblets, 76 of them face down. They open the bottle. 71 years of American military history sits in that room. The 3 shot in Shanghai, the one who starved in a Japanese prison, the 250,000 in China, who had no goblets, no tradition, no one to turn their names upside down. The 3,000 at Midway, on the other side of the ledger, who died because of what these men did on an April morning. Who died, in a sense, because a Japanese patrol boat sent a radio message that the right people couldn't properly read. Jimmy Doolittle, who sat alone in a Chinese rice paddy in the dark on the night of April 18th, 1942, convinced he had failed, lived to be 96 years old. He died in Pebble Beach, California, on September the 27th, 1993. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. The 4 goblets upright, the 76 face down.